Intel 10th Gen i3 versus i5 in Star Citizen. That is what we're looking at today. Let's just get straight into it. Check out the description for the full test setup, but the key bit of information for this one is that I've done 2 sets of testing. I've done a kind of minimum spec testing with slower RAM and with the GTX 1660, and then I've done a load of faster testing with faster RAM running at 3600, and that is with a 4080. So that can compare to the main load of testing I do, and then we've got the minimum spec testing that will compare to the slower CPUs that I'm testing. In space, we'll see that the i5 is a fair bit ahead of the i3, and this is going to be consistent throughout this testing. You will find out that basically the 4 cores and 8 threads of the i3 just don't really cut it. Now, I have tested in the past the 12th gen i3 with 4 cores and 8 threads, and that was so fast, those CPU cores were so fast that that could cope. But actually, when you're going back to slower CPUs, 4 cores, 8 threads doesn't cut it, and really you need 6 cores, 12 threads. I've been saying that for a while, but you're going to see that through this testing. And then when you pop it with faster RAM and faster GPU, basically the i5 matches the 3600, which again is something we're going to see throughout this. Quantum travel for the minimum spec, again, pretty good performance actually. Everything's playable there. You're taking most of the load onto the GPU, so the CPU isn't as important on these lower spec machines, and so all of these results are actually GPU bound, apart from the official minimum spec right there at the bottom, the i5-2400S. And then when you unlock the CPU by putting in a 4080, you'll see the scaling again kind of goes as we expect. Onto the Horizon roof and the minimum spec testing, you'll see that the i3 again has fallen a bit behind, but the 10400 and the 8700, which is kind of in my official minimum spec system, they're actually very similar CPUs. They've both got 6 cores, 8 threads. They both clock to around the same mark. My motherboard for the 8700 is not good, and so the power limit actually limits it to clock basically exactly the same as the 10400. So they're pretty well matched again, and in this result they're slightly ahead of the 3600. When you pop in the faster RAM, you get a bit more speed from all of them, but they're all pretty good, all pretty playable. Even the i3 is above 30 FPS. Next, the render thread, which looks across Horizon and is really heavy on the CPU, shows really good scaling this test. I really like this one. But again, you'll see the i3 is running out of resources. Those 4 cores, 8 threads are just not able to cope, and so it really chugs on this test. And the rest of the CPUs, the 8700, the 10400 and the 3600 from AMD are matched basically. Again, put a bit faster RAM in there, and you're seeing a little bit of an increase in frames for the 10400, and again, matching the 3600. Onto the Area 18 running all the way through Area 18. All playable. Well, no, that's actually not true. The i3 is not playable, but the other 3, the 3600, the 10400, the 8700 are all doing well here. But again, we're seeing the i3 dropping below because it's just not got enough cores and threads to actually churn through the workload that Star Citizen is giving it. And again, faster RAM equals more speed, more FPS, and so again, we've got a good result for the 10400 here. On to Lawville, where I've done the most testing, and so these tests are the kind of most reliable, but it's the same pattern. The i3 is just unable to cope in Lawville, especially with the slower RAM in this test here. The i5 actually is a little bit behind the other 2 here. I'm not exactly sure why that would be, but when you switch over to the faster RAM, you're above 30 FPS with the 10400, so that's all good. We're looking at a playable CPU, I would say. So the takeaways from this one, we'll keep it short. Really, 4 threads, 8 cores just isn't enough. The i3 is not really playable, so if you've got an i3, 10th gen i3, a really easy upgrade is the i5 at least, and you'll see a fairly decent boost in performance, and you'll be more around the 30 FPS mark. But like I said then, this i5 is a great candidate for a minimum spec, I would say. We're kind of hovering around the 30 FPS mark everywhere in game, in the cities at least. Definitely there will be dips in Lawville, for instance. You'll be under 30 FPS, but it's pretty good. And so really now we've got a good picture kind of forming for a minimum spec CPU. So really the i7-8700 from Intel and the 10400 here are kind of matched. And also the AMD Ryzen 5 3600, basically they're all in the same ballpark. And so that is what you would want to go into the game with. I'll keep testing some more minimum specs. I'm tempted to pick up an i7-10700 just to see what the scaling is between the i3, i7 and i5, because my theory is that going above 6 cores, 8 threads doesn't really make much difference, but the clock speed of the i7 is a bit more, so you would see a bit more performance. So I may well pick that up and follow that up. But for this one, the 10400, the i5 10400, pretty good. And so we'll give that a minimum spec thumbs up.